Carl?
Hey, thank you. So, just a couple things.
Mike, you probably should come over here so everybody can.
Well, thank you. We've taken a kind of a lengthy time to get to a point tonight where we have 3 final candidates that we're going to consider as a replacement for Bob. And first of all, I'd like to commend the board and your staff for passing the very important millage question yesterday, and congratulations to our new board persons who one experienced board person and a new board person who will be joining us, and we're glad that you're here to take part of this. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to have 3 interviews starting in a few minutes. There's a couple things that I'd like to remind you of, that each, and for the audience's sake, that each board person has put together a couple questions that were generated from responses from the first interview or from reports from the visitation, or some things that they'd just like further clarification on from the particular candidates. We had an opportunity to visit their districts, and we had a unique time because we have 2 internal candidates, and I think the board really handled that well and came back and reported out to the other board persons what they found and what they thought were important and what the things that they thought they should share to give information about the qualifications and so on of each candidate. So that was done. So we're to the point now where we're going to have kind of an informal interview, and we're not really going to put a time schedule on it. So take as long as you need. I mean, I don't take 2 hours or so, but if we could go 35, 40 minutes, and if you need a little longer than that and have a few more questions, that's okay. And I will keep track of the candidates and keep them entertained while you're going through the process, because the main thing is that you want to make sure that you get at the questions and get answers to those particular questions that you have for each one of the candidates. I do want to remind you of certain things that we can't ask the candidates in the interview, and I just want to remind you those federal things, and the age, the marital status, the religion, those kinds of things that are prohibited by the federal government for you to ask those particular candidates. I think it's important that you remember those, and I know you will, because you've done your homework and you've read the paper that we have. But I just wanted to remind you of that. I think there's certain things that maybe you can glean out of responses that you may be able to get an answer from without directly asking, well, how long are you going to stay here, or what are you going to do, or how old you are, or whatever those, because those types of things are illegal questions. And we want to make sure that we follow the rules, and one of my jobs is to keep you out of trouble. So if you see me jump up and down over here, it may be an illegal question, but I don't anticipate to happen, but I didn't have to go over that, but I just thought that we might want to touch base on that. Any questions about any of those things that we can or cannot ask? I think you're all set. And Phil will run the meeting, probably start the questioning.
That's fine.
And so if there's no other questions, I'll get our candidate.
Okay.
And thanks to the audience for coming and taking part of this. Appreciate it. And then at the end, we'll take a short recess, and we'll come back and we'll go through a process of talking about candidates and coming up with, I've got some ideas to share with you now. candidates. We have the Elises here tonight.
Right.
He's my sweaty palm.
Hi, Charlie Brown.
Yes, good. Bill Gardner. Say Waldo. Good to see you. All right, Waldo.
Hi, Mary. How are you? Welcome. Welcome to this over here.
Well, Waldo, tonight everybody's gonna have a chance to ask you some of the questions. Some of them are based on what you've talked about in the first time we met, and some of the things we may have come up that we want to approach on. I get to ask the first, and it's not a question, it's just more of a lot you to expand on, at least for me. In your first interview, when you focused on some of the vision-related questions, you talked about the important transition from teaching to learning, and as important part of where you want to go. First part of my thing, and just focus on what does it, in this context, does learning mean? Because we use learning all the time, and how does it compare to teaching? And how you're using the word teaching? Because a lot of times that means the same thing.
Right, I understand. I did talk about really my vision and direction that I believe as your superintendent I can take the district actually to the next level of achievement and district-wide excellence. And it is that, it seems like a simple shift as we go from a focus to teaching to learning, but I think it really is something that could be very profound in terms of how we deal with children in the classroom. Essentially, as classroom teachers, as educators, if we really concentrate on whether the students are learning or not, to really focus on that aspect of it, that is the key, I believe, to the improvement. Again, the three questions I think teachers need to ask themselves as they're in the classroom is, one, what is it we want students to learn? Number two, are they learning it? How do we know that they're learning it? And then three, if they're not learning it, if they're having difficulty learning, how do we respond? What do we do? And the crux for me is looking at whether or not students are actually learning what we want them to learn. And I know that we have in place, through our curriculum mapping process, we've done a great job, I think, of identifying what students need to learn and what it is we want them to learn. And the next piece I know that we're going to look at is going on to the assessment piece, the common assessment piece, and that's going to very much help us assess whether they are learning or not. But I think it goes beyond that. I think it goes deeper than that. More at a classroom level, almost on a daily basis, taking a look at how students are doing. A good example is our everyday math program that we've incorporated and implemented the last couple of years here in the district. And I know they have exit slips in a lot of instances for their students. And essentially what they're doing is it's maybe like a small quiz or a small sampling of what they learned that day. Teachers can quickly take a look at that and say, they're grasping the concept or they're not. And if they're not, what am I going to do about that? From my standpoint, where we need to head with this is we need to develop a culture with our teachers of that kind of systematic analysis. We have to look at a lot of data in terms of assessment data, and that's very positive and good things like our MEP data and so on, but I think we need to, as a staff, have those professional conversations together in focus groups trying to look at how our students are learning and whether they're learning. And with that, then we take a look at our teaching strategies. That's the teaching aspect. What are the best practices? What am I doing as a teacher? When you talk with your colleagues and have those professional conversations, certainly sometimes a teacher does something differently and does it quite well, you would use that. And I think that's very, very powerful. There's a lot of different ways to get to that step. This is something that wouldn't happen overnight. This would be a long process that would take place. I believe that, again, our curriculum mapping project can help us a lot in that area, but so can, we need to develop teacher leaders. We talked a lot about that as in our administrative group in developing teacher leaders, because as administrators we can't do it all. But those leaders can help us to forge those small groups of teachers that can look at our children and how they learn in the classroom, again, analytically. I believe it's kind of like a snowball going down a hill. I think it'll take a little time. There'll be a few teachers that'll get involved. Actually, we have pockets of that going on right now. I think as it becomes successful, it'll gain momentum and speed, and as it goes, it gets bigger and bigger, and maybe with some of the reluctant staff, it's so big and so fast they can't get out of the way, and they just get caught up in it, and that's the way I see that. The other, I think the intriguing aspect for me, too, that I think excites me about this is the idea that we're really looking at intervention now as opposed to remediation. If, as teachers, we can continually look at whether our students are learning, and when they are not, do something about it at that stage as opposed to just letting it go on, then we're intervening at that moment, as opposed to when we let it go on, then we try remediation. And I think that certainly can help. I just believe it can only help student performance get better. And that's essentially.
Okay. Let me just quickly follow up, because you alluded to a number of the things that were running through my mind, like how do you get it started on a bigger scale? I mean, obviously you've talked about it. So taking it, and you talk, it's going to take time, and so how are you going to get, as you move it, what strategies or catalysts would you use as you move it out of where you're familiar with it to other, how are you going to get the entire staff in the district to buy into it? And what kind of catalysts drive this kind of thing? I mean, you talked about a snowball, but what are the real catalysts that drive this?
Well, I think there's several things. I believe, first of all, as an administrative group, we need to get, we need to come up with a plan that will help us to develop strategies to get our staff on board. Again, I believe developing teacher leaders that also believe in the concept and understand that the learning is important. And all our teachers understand that learning is important, don't get me wrong, but it's just a little bit different focus on that is important for us to go in that direction. We do have to, I know one of probably the questions that will come up from staff is where are we going to have the time as small groups of teachers to sit down and do this? And that's our responsibility as administrators. If we have a direction or focus, I feel that that's my responsibility as a leader to provide the support for our staff, and we have to find ways to get out of the box and find ways to find that time. And I don't have the specific answers in how that would happen. I know in our own school, we were lucky enough to have team planning, and that right there is a small learning community, a small focus group, and that's where we began in those areas. But I know that elementary teachers too, they forge teams, they work together on their own time, they meet after school, they are doing a lot of curriculum work. And again, right now, we've spent a lot of time and a lot of commitment to our curriculum work in small groups with teachers. We've already established that precedent. I think the next step will be creating that culture and talking about the learning. The other impetus or the other catalyst I feel that is on the horizon anyway, and that's that accountability issue for learning at another level, whether it's the state or whatever. I think that's a strategic issue for the district, for us anyway, in the next several years. And this is for us an opportunity to take that bull by the horns. We're being asked to provide data that students are learning more and more. If we really incorporate that and live that, I think that would be, serve us very well. And I think it's a slow process that we have to work with our staff.
Okay.
Much like we did with the middle school concept.
Okay. Who would like to follow up with the next question? Charlie, please.
I won't ask you that question.
Thank you.
Baldy, as a superintendent, how would you address some of the social issues that our students may encounter, like drugs and alcohol?
Okay. Well, that's always a high priority for a school district. Certainly at each one of our building levels, it's been a priority for us whenever we're in education. Our teachers take it seriously. We take it seriously. We always try to be proactive. I think one of the first things that we all believe in, and this is one of Bob's premises of effective schools, and to make sure that we have a safe and orderly environment. That's very important. As we do that, we make sure that we have policies in place that keep our campuses clean, and that we have a very low tolerance, maybe not quite to zero, but very low tolerance for incidents that happen in those kinds of areas. The next step also is we work very hard all the way through the district, I know, to do developmentally appropriate kinds of activities for our students to keep them in that light as much as possible. It's a struggle. We have to sometimes wrestle with those issues because we're, let's face it, we're inundated with the media and all the things that our children see out there and hear, and yet we're trying to set a different standard for our children, and I know the parents are struggling with that as well. So, I guess a good example would be, for instance, when I first came to Hazlitt, we had an 8th grade party that we had for several years, and that basically approached a mini prom kind of a situation. And our middle school concept talks a lot about activities that are developmentally and age appropriate. We were fighting limos and formal kinds of dress up and dating and dinner beforehand and so on, and really the middle school concept doesn't lend itself to that. And we also as a staff feel, and specifically Gail and I as administrators, and Mike as well, that a healthier, safer direction would be to go in an 8th grade party situation where we had a lot of different activities. It was a Hawaiian theme, dress down. We provided dinner ahead of time. It was just safe and wholesome and a lot of fun. We had excellent participation where we do have now, and those are the kinds of things I think we can be proactive with in trying to curb, the kinds of influences that are out there. Another aspect too is I know that we have a great asset building program within our district and community. I think that's very important. The 40 assets that we talk about continually throughout the district. We need to keep that going because that's a real partnership with the community and the parents and the school. And developing that even further as much as we can certainly is an asset for keeping the drugs and alcohol out of the schools and more importantly, out of our children's lives.
One quick follow-up.
Sure.
Those are a lot of the things that we've been doing. Is there anything different that you've thought of that, as a superintendent, you'd like to try?
No, I guess I haven't, to be honest with you, no.
Thank you.
Scott.
Welcome, Baldy.
Hi, Scott.
Baldy, and this is my first time I've asked this question, so I might stumble through it, so bear with me. I guarantee it's not as confusing as Charlie.
Good.
Yeah, I happen to personally believe that the staff, mainly teaching, but nevertheless not exclusively, the entire staff, must be regularly reviewed, okay, their performance. And a tenured teacher, I believe, can be in a unique position to be seldom, if ever, reviewed by his or her superiors.
Right.
Please tell me, as a superintendent, as if you were the superintendent, how you could assure me and the parents here in Hazlitt that you would either implement or continue a program of employee evaluation that would be of high standards.
Well, that again, I'm going to give credit to Bob because he certainly made that a priority in our district, that we not only hire the best possible and qualified people that we can that really care about kids, but also that we do a good job of developing them and keeping them. But if it doesn't work out, then we may need to have a separation type of a situation come up. I strongly support that. I believe in it. As a building administrator, I've worked hard in terms of evaluating our staff fairly but accurately, and I have that commitment. There's no question. I think that is one of our biggest obligations as administrators to our children, to our students, to be able to make sure that we follow through on the evaluative process with our staff. We have a system right now where we have a growth plan. We have growth plans in lieu of our evaluations for our tenured staff. I think it works well. I do think, as a superintendent, I would like to take a look at that whole package again, to be honest with you. I think we might need to do some modifications. It's in cooperation with our staff. We do it through our union, and we've always been successful with doing that. I don't mean that from a threatening point of view. I just think we could use a tune-up at this time. And maybe even a new evaluation instrument. There's different ones out there, and ours has been around for quite a while. We might want to take a look at reviewing that. But my commitment certainly is there. I do think it needs to be fair, but I do think it needs to be accurate. And again, when you go through the process, you do it with dignity and respect with people as well.
Tell me how you do that now, just for my own information, as far as if you had a tenured teacher in your building right now. Tell me how the evaluation, how it works at this point.
Well, really the number one aspect is that you need to be in that person's classroom on a regular basis. You need to know.
You?
Yes. Yes, myself, or in my case, Gail, if it would be here. Now, if it's the superintendent, it would be up to our principals to do that.
Principal or assistant?
That's right.
Okay.
And of course, if I make that a priority with our administrators, and it already is, so I guess I don't worry about that, then that would happen. But the first step really is to be in that classroom so you really know what's going on. And then you do observations and documentation of what is happening. And again, as I stated before in the first interview, it's very important to do one-on-one, sit-down dialogue with the person, talking about exactly what the strengths are, where there needs to be some improvement, and be very clear about what is expected of that person, and document that process the whole time. Very often, well, not very often, what has to happen really is an improvement plan needs to be in place for a person that does not meet the standards of the district, and that needs to accompany that, and then it's the administrator's responsibility to follow through with the improvement plan to make sure that it's carried out. Hopefully, our aim is always to try and make the employees successful. We want them to be, we want them to be great teachers, all of them, or other staff members, but sometimes it does fall a little short, and we work at it very hard. But that's essentially the process.
Yeah.
Baldy, enjoyed the visit at your school. You're obviously very highly respected by your staff over there.
Thank you.
Meridian High School over the years has really received a lot of support from the board, and we're very proud of how the program has turned into a nationally recognized program over there. How do you feel about alternative education, and if you were superintendent, how would you go about supporting?
Well, I'm very supportive of that as well. The one aspect about public education is that with the resources that we don't have a lot of leeway. We have some leeway, but we don't have a lot of leeway to go out of the box in educating our students. And every child doesn't fit our mold or our system. So it's very difficult sometimes for some of those students. Meridian High is a great example of where we can help some of the students that really need some extra help. We do that at our buildings too. I know it happens at the elementary schools, certainly at the high school and at the middle school too. We accommodate and modify, and they don't have to be special education students or gifted students. They can be just students that are struggling. There might be some issues at home that make it difficult for them. And so we work hard at modifying some things for our children at the middle school as well as the other schools. You may accommodate the day, you may accommodate the kinds of hours that they have, a teacher or an extra teacher that might help out, sessions after school. We do have a success room where students come in and get additional help during the course of the day. Those are very important because they're all our children, they're all our students, and we need to work hard at helping them succeed. That's our responsibility. So I'm very supportive of Meridian High School. I do think they're doing wonderful things over there, and Greg Schick does a nice job over there as principal, and I would continue that support.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If you need ice, we've got ice in ours.
That's okay, as long as it's well.
See, we thought about putting one of those lamps.
Well, that would be good. See, I remember last time you let me drink, so when you asked me, I thought I'd do that again. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. It was pointed out to us as we get into it's a challenging financial environment now for schools. State funding is tenuous at times, and it was pointed out to us that there are really two sides to the balance sheet, if you will. One side was the wonderful efforts that we've made in being very prudent with our expenses. The other side, one component of the revenue we can't control is the state funding.
Right.
But it was pointed out that student of choice, school of choice, is a alternative source of revenue, if you will. What's your perspective, and what would your policies be if you were superintendent on school of choice?
Right. Well, certainly, I think the financial stability of the district is one of our major strategic issues for the next 5 to 10 years, actually. In the next 2 years, after next year, I think the next 2 years are going to be very critical and crucial. And again, like you said, declining enrollment is an issue, but even declining state aid is also a possibility, and that's very worrisome. In the last interview, I know Kristen asked me about the first 100 days in the job, and one of the things I didn't say, and now I get a chance to say it, is that we would certainly, if I were on the job in the first 100 days, we'd need to lay the groundwork for the negotiations for contract settlements and get ready for that, because this is the second year of 2-year contracts for all of our units. So that's one thing that's very important. But schools of choice, I do think that schools of choice can be, and from my perspective, a limited option in terms of increasing enrollment or bringing students in. And the reason I say that is, again, we have a certain sense of culture here in Hazlet, a sense of community, and I think we need to be careful not to change that. And it can change, I believe, if we, really open the doors in terms of schools of choice. Again, I do think our MSU partnership at the Early Childhood Center, the preschool partnership that we have, could be of value as well. I think that as those parents come in, if they're not district parents, one of two things could happen if they're satisfied with the district, and I wholly believe they will be. They'll either move in or they would be good schools of choice people, because they would already be starting with our community and sense of community from day one. So maybe we could increase some more in that area. But I think from my perspective, I think a limited effort in that area is what we need to look at. Again, we might want to look at some marketing partnerships with the township, take a look at developing some areas that possibly would bring in affordable housing for families. I think that would be something that would be, I think smart for us to take a look at and maybe explore as well, because those are concerns in terms of what we're looking at in the future financially.
Thank you.
Mike?
I'll go ahead and go, Mike. Thank you. Baldy, this is just very clear cut. Why you? Why should it be you? Tell me tonight, what makes you different, and why should you be our next superintendent?
Okay, all right. That's very clear cut, you're right.
Well, and I think I hope that gives you an opportunity maybe to say something that you wanted to say.
Right. Well, I think I bring to the, again, this is a wonderful district. We do some great things here. We have some very talented staff, wonderful kids, great parents who wouldn't want to be a superintendent of this district. It really is a great place to be. So it's just appealing, obviously, naturally. But I do believe that I feel that I can take the district, again, in the direction and focus through student learning to another level of achievement. I really firmly believe that. I'm committed to that, and I'm excited about that, actually. We're looking to do that similar kind of thing at the middle school in the next couple of years, and that, to me, is kind of an ultimate challenge. I'm very excited about the kind of culture that we can develop here, because I really think with our staff, the kind of people that we have, they will embrace that. I think that they really, truly do care about their kids, and they want them to learn. They want to be the best teachers they possibly can, and the paraprofessionals that we have. So it's a great place to really take a look at beginning that kind of a process and heading toward what I think is, can be the class school district in the area and the state. So that's what I'm all about in terms of that.
Okay, well, Baldy, I truly believe that past performance can be an indicator of future success, and so this next question is really a two-part question. This may be that confusing question from the last go-around, but...
Do I get like 3 lifelines or anything like that for this question?
Please ask a question if it doesn't make sense to you. This is a two-part question. I guess what I'd try to make it fair to give you a chance to think about it. I'll ask both Part A and Part B, and then come back to Part A.
Okay, thank you.
What administrative procedures or decisions have you made at Hazlet Middle School that you feel has made the school run more effectively as an administrative unit? That's Part A. Part B, in your role as the educational leader of Hazlet Middle School, what initiatives have you started or supported that you're particularly proud of that enhances the learning of students?
Okay, all right. And part A was again?
Part A again was, what administrative procedures or decisions have you made at Hazlet Middle School that you feel has made the middle school a more effective administrative unit?
Okay. All right. Well, certainly, you know, we restructured the middle school 11 years ago, roughly 10, 11 years ago, from a departmentalized school, like a junior high school, essentially, into a middle school concept. And I think that that has been, that was a tremendous task. We undertook that again, myself and Mike at the time. We had a vision, and then Gail too. Gail was very much involved at that time too, even though she was teaching. And but we had a vision for where we thought the middle school should go in terms of helping our students. And we went through kind of a mini strategic planning process in doing that, involving the community, involving our staff, and going through lots of growing pains along the way. It certainly wasn't smooth sailing all the time. But we really did get that in place. The staff was supportive. They were committed. They trusted us and took a chance on us because we didn't quite get the full teaming structure right away. And we said, give it time, we'll get there, and we finally did. And I think that's been very important to our building in general. I think it created a whole different morale, to be very honest with you, on our staff. And it's been I think it's just been a very positive place to be in terms of a staff member, but certainly for students as well. It's impacted those people. I know that we've had other procedures and policies in place that I can't think of some right off, but maybe I'll think of those later. And then part B was, again, I'm sorry.
Well, part B is educational initiatives that you've started or supported that have
Right.
enhanced the learning of children.
Well, I think, you know, I can go back to the middle school concept, but there's been several that we've looked at for our struggling students. And one that, again, we put together a year ago, an in-service for our staff. Gail and I sat down and it was based, again, on this student learning aspect, peace and learning communities. But we took it a little step further. About talking with staff at this in-service day, we spent several hours talking about who is responsible for learning, and tried to, and we really dialogued. It was a great dialogue. We had tremendous input and sometimes debate and sometimes just good professional conversation. But we came out of it understanding that really, you know, it's our jobs, it's our responsibility as educators to, you know, to make sure our students learn. And that's part of the culture I'm talking about. We want to get there. So we also put in place, Gail and I, an opportunity for our staff to what we called our student assistance process. We call it SAP, of course. You have to have an acronym for all these things, but student assistance process. And what it really was having our teachers identify a few of their students on their team that were really struggling, weren't quite making it, and essentially taking responsibility for that student and helping them and guiding them through the year, kind of a one-on-one or one-on-two situation, to where they spent some of their planning time with them on a regular basis, met with them regularly. And we're very proud of that because our staff really took some real commitment to that, and it made a difference in a lot of students' lives. We hope to improve it academically, and it did in some cases. In others, it didn't. But where it didn't academically, it certainly did personally, and it made an impact on their lives as they went home. So that's one that really sticks out because we thought that through the whole process, the way it happened with our staff and how they took ownership of it and then ran with it themselves, we felt was very, very positive.
Any have additional questions?
I've got one, sure, yeah. Hi, good morning. As you know, here in Hazlet, we have a very successful early elementary building, Wiltshire, and it's hopefully going to get even more successful with the new addition for the preschool. However, here in Hazlet, we then split the buildings. Okay, we send all of our little second graders off to Raleigh or Murphy into a 4-year program at either one of those schools. and they separate from their friends. Then we bring them all back together again in your school, and they stay together over in the high school. Could you tell me, in your opinion, if you were to become our superintendent, would there be any thought on your part of making Ralia and Murphy a 2, 3, 4, 5 in either one of those buildings in the future?
This is Charlie's question now.
I passed the question.
Wow, Scott, you did good. I have not personally thought about that, no. That's an intriguing...
Well, give me the rationale educationally that you have for taking a 13-year career in the Hazlet schools and separating all of them for 4 years and then letting them be all together for 9. I mean, I'm struggling with the rationale of that.
Right, right.
I've always struggled with the rationale of that, but I now have a chance to ask a potential superintendent. And you won't be the only one, by the way, being asked this question. So
I'll be watching this.
But you're the first.
Yeah, exactly. I understand, you know, where you're, I don't know if it's a concern, but where you're saying the advantages and disadvantages. Certainly, you know, you could look at a building that was at that point, let's say 2, 3, and then 4, 5. Is that what you're talking about? Right. Certainly, you could look at that aspect, or take a look at the prospect of that. What would be the, you know, the advantages and disadvantages there?
Well, we did it to Wilshire. We did it to Wilshire.
Right, right. And it was, and that we did that with the early childhood concept in mind, and the whole developmental process that we're looking there, and the emphasis there. And I understand that, and I think that's very important. As far as the other 2 grade level, the other 2 schools.
Why does Johnny say goodbye to Sally in the 2nd grade and say, I'll see you again in 5th or 6th? Right. Why does that happen in Hazlet?
Well, they do go to separate schools. That's why. You know, I really don't have a good answer. Is that a real detrimental kind of thing? I'm not sure. You know.
I just wondered if you have an opinion.
No, I really don't. I'm not. You know, I know we have to be sensitive to those kinds of issues. I'm not sure that separation like that is necessarily detrimental. Obviously, making new friendships and creating new kinds of opportunities for you are good as well. But, you know, I really don't have an opinion, and I guess I've got nothing to fall back on in terms of educationally which one would be best. That'd be something I'd have to research.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Harley.
Yeah, Baldy, you just used a word that sort of fits in with my question, the word sensitive.
Okay.
And this involves your ability to communicate with, I don't know, 100 times more stakeholders than you're communicating with now as a superintendent. Because now you're dealing with the Hazlet, all of Hazlet, and surrounding areas of Hazlet as superintendent, because you would in fact be our representative. How do you, with sensitivity in mind, how do you plan to, what's your methodology of communication? How does Valdi communicate with all these different kinds of people?
Well, first of all, as you know, Mary came in with me this evening. We live only 3 miles from here, but unfortunately we live in the wrong direction. We don't live quite in the Hazlet district. But if I was your superintendent, the first thing we'd do, we'd commit to moving to the district. We'd be very excited about doing that, because I really feel it's important for the superintendent to live in the district, because the first thing you do is you become involved with the community. And you do that essentially with building relationships, and you build relationships one-on-one over time. You're in the community, you do things intentionally in terms of being involved. You invite yourself to organizations and clubs to speak whenever you can, because I do think as a superintendent you're the representative for the district as well as the board, and we need to get our good message and and the things that we're doing out to the people. You also invite them in a variety of venues. Get them into the school, get them interested and get them in. We already do that at the middle school. We do that with our 6th grade parents coming in for our primetime coffees. All 6th grade parents are invited, and we spend time throughout the year, 13 different weeks meeting with them. Those kinds of things we could do at the district level, certainly. You have action teams and forums and so on. But really, it's being visible, being accessible, and going out and developing the relationships with people one-on-one. I'm not going to know everybody well one-on-one, but I can certainly touch base with a lot of people throughout my tenure when I'm here, as we do now. And I would certainly do that in the district too. I think it's important to get out, as I do in the building, in the classrooms, in the kitchen, and so on. I'd be out in the bus garage and out at events, and just be certainly part of what is happening.
Additional questions?
Go ahead. Valdi, you've talked about where Hazlet is right now, and you've talked about the difference between teaching and learning and the direction you'd like to go. What vision do you have, if you were superintendent, what vision would you have for Hazlet schools 5 years down the road, and how would you get from here to there?
Well, the vision, the way I would see Hazlet schools 5 years from now would be that we would be working, again, our teachers would be working in small learning communities. We'd be really looking at student learning data and working on student improvement and achievement. And we would be accomplishing that. Our students would be doing very well in 5 years from now and going to that. I think a big part of that is to incorporate all the resources that we can, and certainly technology would be a big piece of that. Our children they live technology right now, and we need to have them live technology in the schools as well. I think that's very important, and that needs to be incorporated and integrated into our curriculum as we go down the road in 5 years. Hopefully, we'll be financially stable. That will. Matter of fact, I feel like we will be financially stable because we need to make sure that we have our priorities set and we have a good base and a good plan for how we're going to deal with the different kinds of things and aspects that come up with the financial picture. But I think we'll be a well-performing district, and I think we'll be a collaborative district as it has been. And I believe I can bring that kind of leadership where we'll collaborate, but when we do need to make tough decisions, we can make those tough decisions and carry through the tasks that we need to have done.
Okay, I have one final question. Valdi, you've been highly successful in moving the middle school ahead, and we all know that. In the process, then, drawing from that experience, what would you describe the strength of your administrative leadership style? What would you think are the key things that you...
First of all, I believe I'm a grassroots leader, okay? And the analogy I'll use for that is a football coach. Of course, I'm going to use that. Bear Bryant would coach from a scaffolding-type tower and let his assistants do the work. And obviously, he was very successful. John L. Smith, on the other hand, he gets down on the field, shoulder to shoulder with his assistants, and gets down in the trenches, so to speak, and coaches with them. Now, he lets his assistants do their jobs. I think that's very important, but he is part of that process. That's the kind of leader I feel I am. I like to be involved at the ground level, what is happening and what is going on, shoulder to shoulder with our staff as much as possible. The reason is I think it gives me a very meaningful understanding of what is really truly happening and not just a rhetoric for what is going on. So that is my basis. That also encompasses the teamwork. Certainly I believe in the team concept. I've grown up around that, being a coach and a teacher all my life. So I am a team player and very team-oriented in that aspect. I do know that as you are a leader, there are times where process is important in the team concept, obviously, in collaboration. But you can certainly get bogged down in process, too. And sometimes you need to make the decision to keep things going. And I do that. I have done that. Sometimes you have to make a tough decision, and you stick with those and stay the course. The other side of it is that you do need adaptability and flexibility. Sharon Jones is making us read a book as an assignment, so we have homework too. And it's called Buck Up and Suck Up and something else. Okay. Thank you. That was my lifeline, okay. But in there, it talks about one part, and it's about the two Democratic guys, Jim Carvelia and Paul Baglia. They were part of the campaigners, so to speak, for the Democratic Party. And the book is about what they've seen in leaders that makes them successful. And one aspect, one chapter talks about the intentionality and improvisationality, is that the word? Improvisational part of a leader, that they're both important. The intentional part is what is your focus, what is your vision, what is your direction. But the improvisational ability is what do you do when things don't go right? How do you adapt? Are you flexible? Can you problem solve? And I believe I'm good at that. I think that you're not always going to get on that ship and just have full sail of wind and no waves, and you're just going and smiling at everybody going down on your course. You're going to have waves crashing at you, and sometimes there's no wind at all. You're dead in the water. So how you adapt to that and what the flexibility is important, and I think I bring that, and I think that's very important. I'd like to share with you also, I guess, as an example of my leadership. Gail and I, again, have put together many professional development in-service programs for our staff, and the one a year ago was very successful. We thought that was great. We put another one together this year, and it was all right. We know it wasn't great, but we thought it was pretty good. But 3 teachers came to us and sat down and basically said it wasn't really that good. Gave us some constructive criticism about our PD day that day, and some suggestions about where we might want to go with it the next time. And honestly, we were a little taken aback, didn't know what to do with it. But as I talked with Gail, I said, if we want our teachers to reflectively analyze about what they do instructionally, we need to do the same. And we did that. We made adjustments. We included teachers in the process, and our next PD was much better. And again, that's that flexibility and adaptability that you have to have. But more importantly than anything for me, in my mind, as I thought about it, what made me the most proud was the fact that those teachers felt comfortable to come to me and critically analyze something or have a constructive criticism. They felt safe about it. They didn't feel threatened. Maybe it wasn't going to turn out the way they wanted, but they felt comfortable doing that. And that's the kind of leader I am.
Okay, and just to follow up, using your word adaptable, in anticipation of moving into a superintendency, what ways would you have to adapt your leadership style or augment it or enhance it?
I'm not sure how much I guess the job would tell some of that. I feel that, again, you need a good administrative team around you. You need to trust the people around you. It would be Sharon and Steve Cook now in the immediate team, and then, of course, our administrative building principals across the board, and then a teamwork with the board. That's very important. That tone that we set amongst the team certainly helps impact and affect your leadership style as well. As you develop relationships with different people and different contexts, that has an influence as well in terms of where you're going to go as a leader and how you're going to deal with things. But I think the basic aspect of my leadership would not change. Again, shoulder to shoulder with people, and when you need to make a tough decision, you do, and you stay the course for the things that are right for our kids. Those things I don't believe would change. That's basically it.
Okay. Any final statement you'd like to make?
Well, again, I feel that I've certainly really appreciated the opportunity. You to ask the question about, you asked the very hard question about, the opportunity of being a superintendent, why you wanted to be that, and I know that during this process, sometimes doubts can come up, certainly in the minds of people, especially people that wouldn't know me very well. But I can tell you this, that overwhelmingly the feedback I've received from my staff is that based on my performance and my reputation, that I have personally been very stable, and I've continued to have good integrity, and I'm certainly happily married with a wonderful wife and wonderful sons, of which the youngest of which, by the way, actually he's a senior now, isn't he? He's a senior, going to be graduating next year, and he just a little plug here. He was on the tennis team, third doubles. Him and his partner, Kevin Mishak, won the league championship in tennis and was second in the regionals. We're very proud of him. He was also voted most improved player by his teammates as well. So I feel like I've done a very commendable job in terms of my leadership at the middle school, and I feel that I can carry that on as a superintendent as well. And that's all I'd like to leave with you with.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you.